Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics in Conflict show. My name is Dr. David Waralu. So good to see you guys. I know it has been a while. Uh, s- I know it lasts, 2 weeks or so. We were dealing with some issues without going into more detail. We're going to talk more on Friday when we do our live. So it just we need to decide how we're going to go moving forward. Uh, we want to provide you the content that you will enjoy more. And so there were some issues there. That's the bottom line to it. So anyway, I am not here to talk about Belan. I am here to talk about the Olympic Games in Beijing 2022 and how that is, it's more than just a games. To me, I look at it as I put on the title, it's the games, it's politics, it's global order, you name it. And I'm going to provide you today, I'm going to wear my analyst hat and I'm going to provide you a brief analysis as to where I see things going given the summits that took place between the Chinese president and the leaders from other countries. But first, before I get into this, let me share one thing with you here that I found very, very interesting. And that is the theme of the Olympics. And the theme that marks the official opening has to do with one word, one world, one family. That's the theme of the Olympics. What's interesting about this, and I am in the process of putting information together for my next book about China, and I have to, of course, dig into the history and so forth. What I found was that this theme that the officials decided to use for the Olympics traces its root back to the ancient Chinese saying, and there was one way back, and I found the closest translation for it that I found, because I don't speak Mandarin. My co-host Ross does, and it says, and I quote here: a truly wise person sees the whole world as a family. End of quote. I find that very, very interesting. Why? Because for me personally, and this is my personal opinion, it supports my argument for the concept of live and let live. And that's what I found very, very interesting. So since we all share one world, can we all coexist in peace and harmony per se? Why the tensions and so forth? But anyway, here is what I found very, very interesting. Of course, the events was there are some head of states that attended. They didn't boycott the games, so they went there. So what President Xi of China ended up doing is he met with all the dignitaries at what they call the Great Hall of the People earlier. So they met separately with each one of them. So from Ecuador to Pakistan, Argentina, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Serbia, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Egypt, among others. What I'm going to focus my talk today is about the summit between China and Russia. And why is that important? For you to know, as I said, I'm going to put my analyst hat and provide you some read into all this. But here is the interesting thing before I move forward. Regarding Argentina, I think we're going to be doing a live on our Friday. We're going to tackle Argentina. That there are some interesting contract that Argentina just signed with China regarding infrastructure. And I digged on that yesterday. As a matter of fact, I read up on certain clauses of the contract. It was very fascinating. Let me just tell you quickly here. That is about $27.7 billion package. So Argentina could become the sort of the lead in Latin America moving forward. And we'll talk about this one on Friday. So regarding the China-Russia summit, which came right after the opening, President Xi and President Putin met together tete-a-tete, face-to-face together. Here is what I found very interesting about that. The interesting aspects of it is given the friendship that exists between both President Xi and President Putin. What I found very interesting from the statement, and I had a chance to read the transcript of it, is that both leaders, President Xi and President Putin, expressed identical positions in respective to what's going on in Europe, which you all know with the Ukraine issue and so forth. Also, both countries, China and Russia, they all called on the West to sort of respond to Russia's security guarantees demand, basically for ensuring that NATO does not expand any further west. The interesting aspects of all this, while this is taking place, the Turkish president was there also attending this ceremony. And he stated that, that the West is not willing to find a solution to the Ukraine or Russia tension issues. Why is that important, you may ask? Well, Turkey is a member of NATO. And this cements my argument or support my argument that I talked about a few weeks ago. As a matter of fact, I did a deep dive video for our members on locals. And I detailed, because you all know why locals and why we go there. And I detailed how the cracks in NATO are starting to emerge. You know, even in Europe, there's a back and forth conversation regarding, okay, where this is headed, why the US is pushing this narrative forward towards over a cliff, per se. So that's what I found interesting about the statements coming out of Turkish president. The other aspects that's very interesting here, which I am going to focus on, which has to do with the economy, and you need to know why. Suffice it to say that the summit sort of focused on two tracks. One of them is geopolitical, of course, and the other one is economic. What's interesting also is that both leaders sort of commented on the bilateral of the relationship, how good it is. I mean, given the history that existed between Russia and China, which we all know, let's not pretend that didn't exist. It did. There were animosities way back. But as I argued in my Russia book, that if both countries, Russia and China, wants to move forward, they're going to have to leave that past behind and move forward. And that's exactly what they're doing, to the point that when they issue the statements about their bilateral relations, a Russian president argued that this is exactly how bilateral relations ought to be between two countries. The other interesting aspects of it, and this one, in my opinion, has a geopolitical message to it. Because remember, all these summits, those were messages sent to the West in a subtle way. Because that's how it works when it comes down to international relations or global affairs or geopolitics. Messages, as I always said, this one here, guys, messages are always sent in a subtle way. And here is the other statement that came out of President Xi. President Xi mentioned that China as a whole, usually when a head of state talks about his or her country, not him or her personally, that China understood and support Russia's proposal for long security guarantees in Europe. Now, what is the message of that? What is the message in that? Well, the message in that is that China is also sending a message to the West regarding Taiwan, which we all know, the tensions that's been erupted regarding the independence for Taiwan and so forth. That was another subtle way for China saying, hey, we not only support China, but also sending a message that will apply also to our issue dealing with Taiwan. That is the subtle way that China was sending, basically saying, both of them, Russia and China, saying to the West, you guys need to abandon, the West, need to abandon this approach, this hawkish approach per se to international relations, and have a mutual dialogue in which we, the West, and us, Russia and China, and any other country for that matter, we can resolve our differences. Having differences is nothing wrong with it. It becomes the what's the word I'm looking for? The judgment, the pragmatism into having the ability to sit down and figure out a way to resolve the issues. This is why I always say or think that foreign policy is mainly about prudence, judgment. And usually when you have individuals in charge that they truly understand the dynamics, you will expect the decisions to reach some sort of an outcome that will be beneficial to all parties. This is where the challenge that I think the West is facing as we speak as we move forward with these challenges that's going on. The summit also sent a message to the West regarding how they have described U.S. impact on the Asia-Pacific region. And why is that important? It's because it's no secret. The United States intends to deploy missiles into Asia and Europe, which does what? It does increase or heighten security risks, that is, and could, to a degree, undermine stability because it's very, very problematic. And usually when I talk on locals, I can elaborate more on this because there are certain keywords that we can use on this platform. As you know, we use them on the other platform. Similarly, both countries, China and Russia, also criticized the emergence of AUKUS, which you all know. We did a video on this one way back regarding the alliance between the United States, the United Kingdom, and Australia, which right now I believe some Aussies are waking up to the reality that was not the smart thing to do. It's up to them to decide. It's their country. They can decide what they want moving forward with the upcoming elections. That's their decision. Only Aussies can do that. Same in Canada, same in England, same in whatever country. This is again where I highlight the idea of how, for example, this summit between Russia and China, sort of, if you put it under the global microscope and you're going to try to analyze it and evaluate it, you're going to say to yourself, okay, is this how bilateral relations ought to be? Let alone that both presidents, President Xi and President Putin, have a good friendship. They do have a good relationship. Usually it doesn't get reported much. As a matter of fact, each one of them attended the other's birthdays physically. I found out about this one that was not reported much. But here is the interesting aspect that I want to talk to you about, and it has to do with the economic incentives and to why that is very, very important. Well, during this summit, both countries have signed some agreements regarding trade that's going to reach about $200 billion. Yes, you heard me. $200 billion. And mainly this, one of the key factors, because I looked at the detail of the agreement, and one that caught my attention has to do with a company by the name Gazprom, which we all know. It's a government-owned company in Russia. It has to do with energy. And China's CNBC, which is an energy company. Both of them signed a contract in which Russia is going to supply China with about 10 billion cubic meters of Russian gas. You may ask yourself, okay, well, what's the deal about this one? Well, it's important given the tensions that's going on in Europe regarding Nord Stream 2. Because there are some possibility that the West could impose some, shall we say, sanctions, restrictions on Nord Stream 2. So by doing this, Russia can secure access to the Chinese market because it's big. And this is where it comes the idea of trying to analyze the Sino-Russia partnership, because this relationship, will develop, as I always say, into strategic. I won't say it is almost developing into a strategic challenge that's going to be for the United States and the West for that matter. Why? Because that challenge is going to manifest itself for the West or the US in Central Asia, given, as I said at the beginning of this, excuse me, at the beginning of this talk here, the countries that President Xi met with, including Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan, and what they all have in common, they are in Central Asia. And this is one of the idea of where this challenge is going to be presented to the West, mainly the United States, is going to be in Central Asia and the Pacific realm. As I said always, there are those who will argue, well, wait a minute, there's this bad blood between Russia and China. Yes, it was. Nobody's denying that. Nobody's saying otherwise. It's a fact, it's a reality, and we ought to acknowledge it, because you can't brush off a part of history like that and pretend like it didn't exist, because that will be short-sighted on our part to do so. However, both leaders are realizing that you can't be hanging on to the past. It's done. It's the past. You turn the page and you move forward. And that's exactly where they are coming from, moving forward. This is where that key into moving this relationship into a strategic one, that is. The other aspect is that while this assertion, as far as the truth of the old history between Russia and China, the two powers coming together as one force, makes more sense. For them to come as one force, it makes perfect sense from both Beijing and Moscow, given what's going on right now in the world. And what's going on right now in the world is that we are witnessing before our eyes the shifting of the world into a multipolar system. And this is where that challenge is going to be for the West, because the outcome will be a direct global military challenge to the West, and especially for the United States, which is going to be coming from the North, the East and the West, given where the location, Central Asia, the Asian Pacific realm. As I said earlier, you're going to look at this from this, meaning summit. You're going to look at it from two angles or two tracks, one geopolitical and one economic. So the geopolitical part has to do with this partnership. Didn't happen in a vacuum, because there were other global dynamics that took place that paved the way for that. And it was the outcome also of the exchange between both countries, Russia and China's sort of delegations, visits, and so forth, back and forth. As a matter of fact, if I am to remember, because I do remember this because I wrote a book about Russia, so I had to do a lot of research. It took me about 2.5 to 3 years to conduct the research before I even wrote the book. So I digged into this. And what I found out at the time was that to highlight this military and economic sort of partnership between the two, I'll go back to 2017, when both countries conducted military maneuvers near the Baltic Sea. It's interesting how the geography can play a role into, once again, as an analyst, I will see the message that conducting military exercises in a specific geographical area sends a message quietly. And that's exactly what happened in 2017, when both Russia and China conducted joint military exercises in the Baltic Sea. 1 year later, in 2018, China joined Russia on its annual Vostok military exercises. Russia conducted a yearly basis in Vostok. Those are called the Vostok annual military exercises. And China joined that back in 2018. And those exercises also have raised concern in the West, given three things. One of them has to do with the visibility of those exercises. Second one has to do with the scope of those exercises. And the third one has to do with the scale of those exercises. And once again, as a geopolitical analyst, I will read the message into each one of them Because why? Because it'll provide you a clear reading because you're going to have to connect that to other trends that's taking place around the world to form that picture of why this will create or raise concern or draw attention, whatever you want to call it. And that's the reason why. It was the visibility, it was the scope, and it was the scale of those exercises. That was back then. Interesting enough is that this cooperation has even moved further when it comes down to the military dimensions, because it falls within the geopolitical realm. It extended also to the sale or purchase of advanced weapon systems from Russia into China. For example, I do remember that Beijing went ahead and purchased Russia's advanced surface-to-air missiles, what they call them SAM, short for surface-to-air missiles. They also went ahead and purchased back then. Remember, back then, nobody had those except Russia, of course, because they developed them, the S-400 systems, which now you got Turkey has that, Iran has that, only few countries. Actually, as a matter of fact, to my knowledge, that's the only countries they have them, in addition to China. So China purchased this way back. Then, additionally to that, I remember the number of how many Su-35 fighter jets China purchased. Where they were about 24, if I'm not mistaken. And I documented this in my book while providing the source of where that information came from. So, and the important thing about this Su-35, they are maneuverable. In other words, they can do so much. It's the equivalency. As a matter of fact, they are a little bit faster than our made F-35s. So this is the important thing. Let me focus on the economic track because this is where the beef is, and that's what you need to know. So the importance of this summit, and for it, of course, they talked geopolitics, but economic was the key. And the economic aspects of it has to do with what I mentioned for the signing of the agreement of the $200 billion. Once again, I remember the research that I conducted. If I am to go back a couple of years ago, in 2016, the trade between the two countries was only about $70 billion in 2016. Then in 2017, it went up to $84 billion. Okay. Then in 2018, it went up to $107 billion. And look at it. They just signed this one for $200 billion. What does it tell you? Because remember, when it comes down to geopolitics, economics is part of that. Financial instruments is part of that. All those are tools that countries use to sort of manage their affairs, a global one that is, or their international relations with other nations. So it becomes the question is, okay, how this will sort of cement that partnership, and could it move it into a strategic one? I say yes. Why? Because of the issue of the sanctions. This is why both countries are moving into that direction. As a matter of fact, and I remember Ross and I, we did mention this way back when we did a video about the digital currency. And we said back then, I bet you, if I am to remember correctly, I told Ross, I bet you by the time the Olympics gets here, most likely the digital currency will be circulating. And that is exactly what is happening now. So in China, as a matter of fact, athletes now are downloading the app so they can use the digital currency. Very interesting how things are moving forward. So the idea for you to tie all this as Russia and China expand their relations on many spheres. This is not limited only to military, on many spheres. You're looking at the past few years, personally, the trend that I've been watching had to do with three main things. One of them has to do with energy. Second one has to do with the military. And third one has to do with technology. This is where those are moving. And of course, I take special interest in the energy. It's because of what's going on right now. And what's going on right now is that in addition to the $200 billion that they just signed, which most of it has to do with energy, it has to do also with Russia building one of the most advanced ports in the Timier Peninsula up north in the Arctic. That's almost $100 billion project. And I'll get into it later on. Let me finish this section here first, then I'll transition into that one. We all know that China is contributing financially to Russia's projects in the Arctic. At that time, I remember we mentioned it in one of our videos. The area it sits on about $35 trillion worth of natural resources. You might say, well, that's a lot. It might not be. That there's more to it than just that one. And this is why China is moving forward with supporting financially, because the pipelines that they are in process of building is going to come directly to China. It becomes the question of, do you see, and I hope you guys do you see the shifting of the geopolitical landscape that is moving from a unipolar setting to a multipolar setting? Because that's just the norm. That's part of how things work when geopolitically, when countries kind of cooperate. This is why you're seeing, for example, Argentina jumped on this and signed the deal. Serbia went ahead and signed contract with China. Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan already had a deal about transporting natural gas through the pipelines that China is going to build. So you can just see those dynamics are moving forward. And hopefully on Friday, if we decide to do the one about Argentina, we're going to provide you a little detail into how that's going to shape now the relationship in Latin America. And what does it mean in the backyard, in our backyard here? Because that is a major shift that I see coming. Because you got already Ecuador, for example. Next is going to be Chile. Brazil will be after that. Peru, which is rich in minerals. And who's to say? Maybe even Mexico. That's a possibility for that. Venezuela, of course, with all the energy or the oil it has, because it's an OPEC member, the oil producing exporting countries member. So let me go back to talk about the Timier Peninsula port. Why is that important? Well, it's a very, very big project. It's big projects when you consider, for example, how much oil that's going to supply the global market. That particular location in the Timier Peninsula, and I think on Friday, if it comes up in a conversation, we'll bring up a map of it. I don't have access to it here, but I'll have it ready for Friday. And the idea for this to move forward, because it's not a small project, $100 billion port. When you think about $100 billion port, you're going to be thinking in terms of what is the infrastructure that's going to sustain something like this. So what are we talking about here? We're talking about developing over 10 to 15 villages over there. We're talking about several electrical plants that need to provide electricity for that. So we're talking about building 2 airports. So they're going to be built about 2 airports. And all this is for it to house about 500,000 workers, about 400,000 plus workers to make it happen. The interesting aspects of it is that this one will sort of bring oil from that part of the world. Okay, it can take it all the way to Europe. It used to take about 48 days. Now it will take only 19 for example, a cargo ship to go from China to Rotterdam in Holland. And I've been in Holland, I've been in Rotterdam before. I saw how big that port is. 19 days, that's very impressive because the cost associated with it. But also this one has to do also with the melting ice up in the Arctic. So it's going to open up the waterways, and this is why the investments in there. So the pipelines that's going to be built. So as a consultant, when we advise our clients that deals with energy and security, well, one of the things that I would always ask the client is, what would you like to achieve? What is your objective? Why do you even want to get involved into this? Simple question. The same thing we ask if we are to provide advice to governments. In this case, you're going to ask the government, whomever that is involved in the project, why do you want to get involved into this? How that's going to benefit you. Well, in this case, and in the case of China, it's because the melting ice is going to pave the way for the building of the pipeline that's going to come straight down from the Timier Peninsula all the way through into China. That cut down the travel time by so much. And this is the reason why there is that investments into this. We're going to do a presentation for this, but unfortunately, guys, it's not going to be on YouTube here. It's going to be for our members on geopoliticsinconflict.com. We do have member there that we do provide them those kind of presentations. That usually those are not. There are some presentations that I only provided for the Department of Defense, for example. We can't put that stuff here, and you know why. There is no need to beat the dead horse here. So here's my conclusion to you. As a geopolitical analyst, as a consultant, I ask the question. And here's the question, just for you to contemplate, to think about, because you always, as an analyst, you always want to have, what's the word I'm looking for? You always want to have scenarios. What if? And you don't come up with one. You come up with 4 or 5 scenarios. What if? It's the same scenario that I played out 6 years ago when I was arguing in my writing. What if the partnership between China and Russia move into a strategic alliance? How that's going to shape the global geopolitical landscape? How that's going to shape the global military order? How that's going to shape even the new global order as we know it? Because I played those 4 or 5 scenarios back then and the possibilities of how it might go. Well, the same thing apply here. And I ask the question is, what role does China contemplate for itself in the new global order? It's a fair question. It's a legitimate question. You can come up with your own conclusion. Once again, I'm just putting the question for you, food for thoughts, as we say. As I said at the beginning, I put my analyst hat and the question for you, and I'll be happy to comment on your answers once I log into the comment and answer your comments there. The question is this: what role does China contemplate for itself in the new global order? So here's the thing: we are witnessing the world moving into a multipolar system. It's not a secret. It's not a mystery. It's just part of how things are, especially given the rise of China that is forging ahead with economic ventures, as I mentioned earlier, with Argentina, Pakistan, Kazakhstan, Turkmenistan, Russia, and others. So will it be fair to say that the stage is set? This meteoric rise of China, the decline of the US share of global power, the dissolution of the global order, and also the possibility of a joint military ties at an unprecedented scale between Russia and China. And what will it mean for the future global order, or the military order, that is? Because all this, in my opinion, suggests one thing: that the shift in the global balance of power is already underway. Pretending otherwise is not realistic. And this is what I wanted to share with you guys, just to provide you a brief readout on it. Of course, we don't, it's tiring. It's truly tiring, and I'm going to say it because I don't sugarcoat it. It is very tiring that I have personally to be thinking about what I'm going to say and how I'm going to say it, rather than saying it the way it's supposed to be. But on the other hand, we've worked so hard to be where we are today with your support. And this is why I'm asking. Make sure you guys subscribe to our other platforms on Rumble and Locals. As a matter of fact, we would love to have you guys support us there as well. We will always be here. We will provide content for you here, a quality content, because we're not here just to sit down and chat. I'm not here. I can't waste my time that way. The amount of energy and time, not only me, all of us, the entire team, we're putting into this. You guys, I am sure you're smart enough to know how much effort it takes behind the scenes to make this happen. How much effort all of us we have to put in for us to provide you that quality content. And this is where we are asking for your support. You don't have to be a member if you don't want to. Super stickers will help. Whatever. Usually it's very hard for me to ask for this. I don't ask. I'm a very independent guy. Thank you. Oh, let me see who that is. Yeah. Thank you, Rafael. I truly appreciate. I couldn't see it. I have to put my glasses on. So the super stickers means a lot to us, and your support means a lot to us. It's very, very tiring to be, as I said, I have to think twice about, okay, should I say this word or not? Because we can get removed quickly for no reason. We don't even know why. That's what we've been dealing with for the last 2 weeks. And mainly Elizabeth has to be dealing with this. So your support means a lot to us. And we miss you guys because we learn from you as well. So I look forward to seeing you guys on Friday during our live stream. We'll post the stuff ahead of time. We're coming up with some new approach to all this. We will detail this on Friday. We are still here. And for those who said that if we had a visit from the government, no, we did not. Maybe not yet. But if they do, I'll handle that one. This is what I wanted to share with you guys. Make sure to check out the postings on Locals because I do provide some insights there. And we look forward to seeing you next time. So I'm going to shut up here. As always, stay informed. Till next time. Bye-bye.